We've got Patricia Murphy, we've got Francis Townsend, we've got Jill Doherty. We're also going to be joined now by General David Maddox. We're also going to be joined by Larry Johnson from the CIA. And, of course, Jeffrey Toobin, our legal analyst, because there's a lot of things to get to when it comes to what's going on with Gitmo. Let's start there. Patricia Murphy, if you would. At my count, there are 245 people still there. What are we going to do with them?
Well, that is the big question. That's why one of the 4 executive orders that we saw signed today says, what are we going to do with these guys? He's creating a special task force to look into this question to say, are we going to try them, transfer them back to their own countries, or are they going to come to the United States? It's very, very unclear. And again, we hear it again and again. The devil is in the details. I will say for this entire day, if you look at the arc of the choreography here, this was all very, very well planned. First, the executive orders, then Hillary Clinton arrives to a hero's welcome from career diplomats, then these 2 special envoys. This is all designed to say the Bush era is over, the Obama era has begun, full stop. Let
me bring in our CIA guy, Larry Johnson. Mr. Johnson, this is what Mr. Blair said, the Admiral Blair, Director of National Intel. This is what he said about shutting down the secret prisons and about torture. He says it is a rallying cry for terrorist recruitment and harmful to our national security. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. He's right. A friend of mine was the commander down there, and of those 245 left, about 15 are genuinely bad people that we're going to have to figure out some way to prosecute, incarcerate them, literally bring them to justice. The other 230, some of them were picked up. For example, in Afghanistan, we offered a $25,000 bounty for al-Qaeda members. Some people brought a guy named Dostum, would just grab people off the street, bring them in and say, these are al-Qaeda members. Some of the people there had absolutely no involvement with terrorism. And how would you feel if you were taken, forcibly incarcerated? You can understand that a lot of these people do have some legitimate anger at the United States for holding them as criminals without any due process whatsoever.
It sounds like you're saying we've made them more mad and possibly more volatile than they were to begin with. Jeffrey Toobin, let me bring you into this conversation. What do you do with these people there, and can they be prosecuted if they can somehow prove that they have been tortured?
Well, before we move to the details, I think it's important to emphasize what an important step this is. Guantanamo is a very important symbol of the United States, and it has been entirely a negative symbol. And the fact that we will no longer incarcerate people there is extremely important to the national image. Likewise, the total rejection of torture. Of course we've tortured people. We've waterboarded people. There's no doubt about that. That's been acknowledged, and waterboarding is torture. We're not waterboarding people anymore, and that's very important. As to your question of how we deal with them, it's going to be difficult, and we're going to deal with them in different ways. Some of them will be returned to other countries. That's been a process underway for several years.
I'm talking about the 15 that Mr. Johnson alluded to just moments ago that may be bad guys.
The Obama administration hopes it's only 15. He says 15. It may actually be more. Certainly Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is there. We know he's going to be tried in some way. Some of them will be tried in American courtrooms under civilian justice. That can be done, and it will be done. The real question is, are they going to create any new programs? Is there going to be a national security court? Is there going to be some kind of replacement for the military tribunals? Something that is a justice system but short of the criminal justice system that we have in place. That's the hard question at the core of this year-long review, but most importantly, Guantanamo will close.
You know, there's something else that we need to get to, because if there's a new rule, this is what it entails. And these are the president's own words. He said that we must now follow the Army Field Manual for interrogations instead of torture, or in place of torture. Well, what is the Army Field Manual for interrogations, and what does it call for? When we come back, we're going to be talking to a former general who happens to have in his hand that Army Field Manual. Go ahead, show it to us. You got it right there?
I've got it right here.
There it is. All right, we'll be going through that. Maybe you can explain to us exactly what the new policy is going to be. We'll be right back. We're going to take a break. President Obama has made a lot of changes, and most significantly, on this day, the changes have come maybe more of a tectonic shift when it comes to the United States foreign policy. We've got a lot of stuff to get through, but I promised you that we would talk to a general, because as the president described it, no more torture means we now follow the Army Field Manual for interrogations. Once again, joining us now is the general who's going to be taking us through this. General, former general, I should say, or not? You're not a former general, but you're a retired general. Thank you very much. What does the manual call for?
The manual in one section lays out those things that are clearly identified as torture and says they will not be used. And then there's an entire section that lays out 19 different approaches that can be used by interrogators to gain actionable intelligence.
And yeah, I was just reading a New York Times briefing that referred to them as the 19 techniques. Could you tell us? I mean, does it specifically state what you can and can't do, or is it more nuanced than that?
It is a little more nuanced. It goes into different approaches that you can use in dealing with prisoners. And so there's an entire section that goes through different ways that you can deal with different prisoners at different points in time and based on that particular prisoner's position and attitude.
Jeffrey Toobin, let me bring you into the mix here. Is it hard for a prisoner to make a case that they have been tortured?
Well, it depends. There's no mystery here. The United States has acknowledged that we waterboarded people. Susan Crawford, who is one of the people in charge of the military commissions, just made a finding last week saying, we tortured. That's the word that we used. I don't think there's any doubt that we tortured people in the past during the Bush administration. So yes, there can be some disagreements about what precisely constitutes torture, but we don't have those disputes. We know that we tortured people in the course of the war on terror.
Do you guys, by the way, Jeffrey, do you believe that this shift today, this tectonic shift, as I alluded to moments ago, is it a change or a repudiation, or both?
Total repudiation. It's a complete rejection of how the Bush administration conducted the war on terror in this regard. But when it comes to interrogation, Dick Cheney said on Larry King Live, among other places, he thinks waterboarding is not torture. It now is American government policy that waterboarding is torture and it's prohibited.
But here's the problem. There are still some within the CIA who are saying, look, we want more options than just those 19 techniques that are presented there. Let's bring in a CIA man, Larry Johnson. What would they want?
Rick, that's really not right, because number one, understand that in the Central Intelligence Agency, you don't have interrogators. The CIA case officers that go out overseas, when they recruit people, it's more like trying to get somebody out for a dinner date. They have never had a training program. In fact, when I went through the training and we were done, they did what they called the hostage problem, where we were taking hostage, we were interrogated. We brought in military interrogators to do the interrogation. It's also important to note there's an international convention against torture that the United States is a signatory to, and despite what Fran Townsend said earlier, there is no dispute about what constitutes torture. It's laid out in that document very well. It was just the Bush administration chose not to look at it, not to read it, and not to enforce it.
It seems to me, as we watch what happened today, that President Obama is trying to send a message to the world, it seems. I mean, even in his language, did you notice that he never referred once to this as a war on terror? He used completely different language. He hasn't even co-opted or used the language that was being used in the prior administration. General Maddox, I understand you met with the president today, yesterday?
We met with him this morning before the signing, and then we were actually in the room when he signed the 3 executive orders.
And did you have any conversation about this tectonic change that we would be seeing today? And what is the president trying to send as a message?
I think the clear point he's trying to make is that this nation has values, and our policies will be consistent with our values. And we're not going to torture. We're not going to have 2 sets of rules. There are things we do as a nation and things we don't. And I think that this message is not as much for internally as it is for outside. Yeah. That you cannot let terrorists and others use our actions to justify theirs, and cannot use it as a means for them to recruit people to work against us.
General David Maddox, Larry Johnson, Jeffrey Toobin, my thanks to all 3 of you.